Scaruffi, and he is going to talk about artificial intelligence. He's one of the founding members of Olivetti, right? For Artificial Intelligence Center. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce him.
Okay, my background is mathematics actually, and then artificial intelligence in the 80s. I founded one of the artificial intelligence centers back then. And after that, I really call myself a cultural historian these days. So I started writing books. Some of my books are on rock music, jazz, and so on. And some of my books have been translated in China. I'll tell you why I mentioned this. This is me in China. This is just vanity. And I also founded some interdisciplinary events, the Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous and the Last Festival. And if you want to know about this, go to lasertalks.com or to lastfestival.org. The first one who comes here and tells you don't buy my book because I'm revising it, new edition by the end of the year. I just don't have time to put things together. You can download these slides on my website, scaruffi.com, if you want the details. And you may want to download them if you're interested in some of these things, because I'm planning to go very fast, except I'm making it challenging with this system. I like to start with this slide because it shows that the original programmers were all women, but that's a different talk. From the very beginning, from those days, the computer was called the electronic brain. And you can find a lot of these articles that talk about the giant brain, the electronic brain. In fact, that book, Giant Brains, is the first book published on the electronic digital computer, and it's titled Giant Brains. So even before the famous conference on artificial intelligence, the idea was there. In fact, I found an article published in 1934 on the Meccano magazine that asked, can machines think? And there's a reason, it's a long reason. So anyway, this is when the name is coined. By the way, there was another conference just a few months earlier where some important papers on artificial intelligence were published. Anyway, details. The problem with that conference is that there was no definition. For that day, Socrates was turning in his grave. Where's the definition of artificial intelligence? When does computer science become artificial intelligence? When does an algorithm become an AI algorithm? To this day, we don't have it. And so, depending on whether it's fashionable or not, everything is AI or nothing is AI. I have friends who removed artificial intelligence from their resume in the late 90s, early 2000s. So anyway, I'm sure you heard this 1,000 times. Two main schools of AI. I actually think there's many schools, but two main ones. The symbolic one was trying to simulate the way the mind works, and the other one was trying to simulate the structure of the brain. So two different approaches to artificial intelligence. And for a while, the first one prevailed. In fact, 1969, the first ICHCAI, I counted only 2 papers on neural networks. One simple explanation is that the machines were just not powerful enough. Neural networks done seriously require massive computational, all of AI requires a lot of computation. But the problem was bigger for neural networks. And people blame Minsky's book and Chomsky's article with giving neural networks a better reputation. That's only partially true. I really think that it was just difficult to do neural networks back then. By the way, trivia. I like trivia. Tonight we don't have a lot of time for trivia. One reason why nobody responded to Minsky's book is very simple. That Pitts, McCulloch, and Rosenblatt, the 3 founders, connectionists, the 3 people who made it popular, they all died either in '69 or a couple of years later. Anyway, Symbolic AI was popular. It did deliver something. I was there in the age when you could actually make money out of expert systems, but overpromised. The main problem, there's been, depending how you count, there's been many AI winters. And I think one of the biggest problems is always overpromising. These are some of the statements. You don't have time to read them all, but some of the most influential people in AI promised super intelligent machines within a few years, which is never a good strategy in the long term. And then some reports. There was a report in the United States, the ALPAC, and then a report in UK that also killed funding for some AI research. And then the fifth generation was something big in Japan that in the United States was maybe oversold, and that created expectations again. So whatever reason there was, eventually AI has been obviously saved because now it's popular again. And all of us who are my age or older are dusting off all the articles, all PPTs. We have a second life. Just again, as a cultural historian, what saved artificial intelligence? And I really think I point out two main disciplines and then Canada. And neuroscience, because I think there's a moment when papers on neural networks become interesting again. And that starts really with Fukushima's convolutional nets. They were based on a discovery in neuroscience, something about the visual cortex of the cat. And then physics. Hopfield was a physicist. And his neural network really showed that Minsky was wrong. I mean, Minsky wasn't wrong, but that you couldn't extrapolate to all topologies of neural networks. So that came from neuroscience and from physics, which is kind of interesting. And then I created Canada, number one, if there's any Canadian, happy 150th anniversary. But in Canada, that institute turned out to be very important for the development of artificial intelligence as it is today. So anyway, number one factor in deciding the future of artificial intelligence back then was Moore's law. Moore's law really made a difference because it gave computational power to neural networks. And then it made sense to start looking into neural networks. Now, neural networks, there was research. In fact, somebody in 1965 in Russia already figured out how to do many layers of neural networks. I hope everybody is more or less familiar with what a neural network is. The big problem was how do we do multi-layer neural networks, because the feeling was if you add layers, we get more out of it. And very recently, somebody published a paper on very deep neural networks that proves just that. It's not just intuition. It's really the case. So as I said, Fukushima started it. Then there was research in reinforcement learning, which actually was already Minsky's thesis in 1954. As I said, John Hopfield's neural network. I'm not going to describe this. But the reason I'm showing them is I want you to see the math, okay? Restricted Boltzmann machine, the back propagation algorithm as we know it today, and two important theorems as a mathematician. Those two theorems gave me confidence that this was the right way to go, because one showed that neural networks can approximate any continuous function of the kind we use, and the other one showed that they're equivalent to a Turing machine, so they can do everything. And then LeCun came up with the kind of convolutional networks that we use today. Long, short-term memory was another important thing invented in Germany and Switzerland. And so there was progress in neural networks. It was invisible to most people because even the famous achievements of artificial intelligence did not use neural networks. So the first self-driving car, serious one, was in 94, Deep Blue 97, Watson, Siri. So none of this was using neural networks. In fact, now we call it AI, but machine learning, quote unquote, was done mostly with statistical methods. And I suspect still today, a lot of big data is done with statistical method, but now it's more called AI. And probably SVM is the most used. Then something happened, 2006 and 2007. within few months. Geoffrey Hinton and Ben Zhou published two different ways to do multi-layer networks. That's the breakthrough. That's deep learning starts there. Today we don't use exactly this thing, but that's the two fundamental ideas were there. They explain how you can have many layers of neural network and do something meaningful with it. So that's the beginning. And I call it the annus mirabilis of deep learning is 2012, when using deep learning, students of Hinton achieved a very low error rate, major improvement in the error rate of recognizing images. And since then, that's been going down to human level accuracy. In 2012, in fact, when you start having all the sensational headlines, probably the first one was when this Google Stanford team showed a neural network, I don't remember, it was 7, 8 layers that recognize cats in YouTube videos. And Microsoft has this graph that shows that speech recognition, the error in speech recognition, bang, goes down. When? About 2012. Coincidence or not, the GPU invented for video games, maybe I should add video games to the disciplines that saved AI. The GPU started that exponential improvement 2006, about 2006. So that's a lucky coincidence that just when we invented the software, the algorithm to do multi-layer networks, guess what? NVIDIA gave us the GPU that we can use to implement those things. The other unsung heroes of deep learning are the data sets. To train a neural network, you need a data set. And the bigger the neural network, the bigger the data set you need. This is superficial speaking. So we have to give credit to these historical data sets that human beings created, sometimes with hundreds of thousands, millions of labeled items. That's what you use to train a neural network. No data set, neural network will not do much. So why 2012? I told you it was quote unquote invented in 2006. The first success story is in 2012. Well, two things you need: the training data set and the computational power. So about 2012, guess what? It's exactly when you get both. So you have on one hand somebody discovered a way to do it. On the other hand, you have the tools to do it. Okay. Trivia. I love trivia. I wish I had more time for trivia. Look at I wrote my favorites. The stars of deep learning. Look at where they were born. I'm also an immigrant, so I had to show this slide. There's nobody from the United States. A lot of them work in the United States now, but they were not born there. And it's very interesting, and that's another interesting story. That's a different talk. Why? I have a rational explanation for that. Okay, anyway, as you know, I got tired of updating this slide. There's acquisitions all the time. So you found a startup that sells shoes, put on it artificial intelligence, some major company will buy you out. And Venture Scanner, you can go to their website. Now it lists 1,898 AI companies. How many in the 80s? The previous boom, maybe 50, 100? So anyway, a few words about AI in China, since I go there often. So in China, AI is extremely popular. And it's funny because 3 years ago, I told them, I have a book in AI, would you like translated? No. This year, I translated my book in record time. So there's a chatbot that probably has more users than any other chatbot in the world. The news recommendation website, Toutiao, seems to be very good. I don't read Chinese, but I posted that thing because it gave a news about me, recommended news about me. Voice recognition, face recognition are used in practical things. You can pay with your face. And there's several AI unicorns, so extremely popular. The BAT, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent are the three big AI companies in China. They all have very ambitious plans in AI. And that's to be taken seriously because A very simple definition of AI, if you ask a mathematician, is computational math. Everything I showed you, see, that's why I showed you. And this I will emphasize later when we talk about jobs, if I have time. It's math. And guess what? In 2015, I saw the news that China was building the equivalent of 1 university per week. And China has more STEM graduates than the United States. And look at the growth. In 2016, China STEM graduates 4.7 million. USA, 568,000. No, it's not proportional to population. It's way bigger. Okay, good luck. And guess what? 2016, this couldn't escape my attention because China published more papers than the USA on deep learning. Nothing major, but sometimes quantity eventually makes quality. And of course, China generates more data than the rest of the world, both for political reasons, which I don't want to get into, and just because it's big. Now, the other big difference is that it's really a commitment from the top. That's me with the governor of one of the biggest provinces. The government of China has sanctioned AI as a strategic technology. So just 2 weeks ago, on July 20, China State Council issued the next generation artificial intelligence development plan. So it comes from the government. That's why it's so serious. So anyway, back to our history. Now I will go very quickly because this is a little boring. But number one, I want to show to the ones who are into AI here that I know what I'm talking about. And number two, some of these things are intriguing. So what happened in the last few years? Reinforcement learning, you heard about it. Reinforcement learning was used since at least 2009 to play Go, which in China is called Weiqi. And there were already a lot of cases where they did extremely well, beating champions. Of course, when Google does it, then everybody talks about it. Recurrent neural nets, I think the original application was to guess the next word in a sentence. So natural language processing is one of those things that still don't work well in artificial intelligence. But then it has been applied to machine translation, and I think it went live on Google in November last year, something like that. And so you should have if you use it, you should have noticed a quantum leap in quality. And then Oriol Vinyals had the great idea to use it to think of translation in a broader sense. So if you want to generate the caption, the description of that image, that's a translation. It's the translation from an image to text. And so Google, in November 2014, posted this wonderful thing on their blog where it shows that how the the neural network generated descriptions of the scenes. The famous one is down there, a group of young people playing a game of Frisbee. That's amazing because you can barely see the Frisbee. What most people don't notice is the second row at the end. There's this one. It's a street sign, and the neural network wrote a refrigerator filled with lots of food and drinks. And we'll go back to this one later. GAN. It's not my fault if they gave horrible names to these things. But that's another fascinating thing that happened recently. So recognizing an image is already impressive, useful, but we can do more, okay? We know what the dog is. We don't just recognize it. If I ask you, or even a child, draw a dog, you will sketch something. That's my attempt to an artistic dog, a post-impressionist dog. So can neural networks do that? Goodfellow invented this type of neural network for a different reason. It's basically a good network and an evil network, and the evil network is trying to fool the good network that is trying to learn something. It turns out if you do that, this one learns faster, okay? But in doing that, the evil network is generating fake things. And this paper by Alec Redford and others really shows the power. This is from his paper. All images in this paper are generated by neural network. They are not real. But if you look at them, they look real. That's furniture, okay? But he said they're not real. It's a neural network generated that. So this thing got immediately hijacked to generate things, because that's an important step forward, okay? Not just to recognize, but generate. And so in the last, I think this is all last year, somebody had the idea to use them to do the opposite of captioning. Given a text, show me an image. So, text to image. So you write that text, small birds, whatever, and that's what the neural network generates. And even video. So you give a text, and the neural network generates a video. So that's interesting, right? It's a step beyond recognizing. And this very recent also, invent a new style of art, generate a new style of art. We'll go back to that one. So the third thing that happened recently is that it got really easy to experiment with these things because there are so many platforms. A lot of them are open source. Some of them have been available for a long time. As usual, when Google does it, everybody talks about it. And this is interesting. And this is just in the last few weeks. DT42, I think, is based in Taiwan, and they released this BerryNet that runs on a $35 Raspberry Pi. I don't know if you know the Raspberry. It's used a lot by the makers community. $35, you can experiment with deep learning. Another thing that happened recently, automatic machine learning. Why? Because building a neural network today, I couldn't do it. It's just so incredibly complicated, especially as you go down in layers. So some people started thinking, why don't we use a neural network? We train a neural network to create to design the neural networks we need. And so automatic machine learning. There are at least 3 different ways to do it. I will not read the details. As usual, when Google does it, everybody talks about it. So Google did it just a few weeks ago. Robots, I'm sure you've seen a lot of videos of cute robots. These are robots you can find here in Silicon Valley, in stores, shopping centers, and so on. Warehouses, fully automated these days. You probably heard of the DARPA challenge. You've seen the videos of all these robots walking, running, and so on. Next step, cloud robotics has been around for a while. I call it the Wikipedia for robots, where robots can just go to the web and find something that either a human being or another robot has learned. And then they can use it. And this has been around for a while. Again, when Google does it, everybody talks about it, but it's been around for a while. And Europe has 2 big projects for it. My friend Ken Goldberg is one of the people who is training robots in virtual reality. So instead of breaking real objects, break objects in virtual reality. And recently I got an invitation to the International Congress on Love and Sex with Robots. I'm not sure if that's progress. Okay, so one other thing that has happened is that as these neural networks get many layers, I think the record now is Microsoft 152 layers, it's really impossible to understand why they work. It's great when they work, but the job of the neural network designer is not a lot of fun. It's tweaking, then bang, suddenly it really works. And sometimes it really works better than the designer expected. So nobody quite understands why they work the way they work. And that becomes a problem because as Carlos Gestrin team wrote, why should I trust you? I mean, would you trust this kind of technology in your car, driving your car, and you don't know how it works and why it works, and there's no scientist who knows why it works? Why should I trust you? And so there's different papers coming out trying to explain that, and it's serious enough that DARPA is a project called Explainable Artificial Intelligence, XAN. Okay, so again, for those who came late, if you want the details, you can download the slides from my website. Okay, the other thing that happened is, which it's interesting to me, is art. So somebody at Oxford University came up with the idea of let's ask the neural network what it has learned, not just to recognize an image, but tell me what you learned, and or play the network in reverse. And then you get this kind of strange answers, and somebody realized, wow, that looks like art. So Andrea Vedaldi is a member of that team at Oxford. And again, when Google does it, everybody pays attention. So somebody at Google did it, and now it's called inceptionism. Probably you've seen these pictures. Even more interesting, what these people did in Germany, where they trained a neural network to the style of this, I assume it's a Russian painter, okay? That's a real painting, the first one. The second one is not a real painting. The second one, they just gave the object, the picture of a real object, to the network, and the network painted, generated an image based on the style that learned. And this is Maya Ackerman performing music and lyrics composed by two algorithms at one of the events that I organized, these lasers that you can see at lasertalk.com. Okay, I already mentioned this. Good. Oh, in China, there's also a book, a poetry book written by Microsoft chatbot. So, no wonder that some people got scared. So people are much more intelligent than me got scared. I didn't get scared because I'm not as intelligent as them, obviously. And you probably, okay, there's very serious initiatives to make sure that AI is used for good. And you probably heard just this week that Musk and Zuckerberg are bickering. Billionaires can afford to do that, and everybody talks about it. I liked Rodney Brooks. I recommend you go to his blog. Rodney Brooks is a veteran pioneer of robotics. His blog has some interesting discussions on this. So anyway, so Silicon Valley is the homeland, is the birthplace of the Singularity movement. And again, don't buy my book. It's being revised. But I wrote the book because of Singularity, not because of AI. It was more of a cultural, philosophical book when I wrote it the first time. Now, my opinion on the Singularity. It really rests on four assumptions. The first one is that progress in AI is amazing. The second one is that progress is accelerating in our age. It's a unique age. The third one is that technology is creating the first superhuman intelligence. And the fourth one is that for the first time we have machines that can do things that no human being can possibly do. So let me go quickly over it. The longest one is the first one, because it's a reality check on everything I told you. I mean, there's no question that a lot of things are happening in AI. First of all, I assume you know there's a big difference between the digital neuron and the real neuron. Okay? Your brain, just in the retina, there are 70 different kinds of neurons. Okay? And no two neurons in the brain are alike. Okay? And neurotransmitters, they communicate with more than 50 kinds of different neurotransmitters. So I hope there is no doubt that a neural network, no matter how sophisticated today, is not even remotely close to a human brain. Yeah, that's the neurotransmitters. Second thing, yes, AI, that's in general, AI, these terms, today we credit everything to artificial intelligence. In general, machines can do smarter and smarter things. But don't forget that usually they do them in very structured environments. The most useful robots are in a warehouse where there are no pedestrians. There's no children playing soccer around. And they can do extremely efficient work. It's a very structured environment. And even a self-driving car, we started thinking of it in places where there's a dividing line, there's a white line, there's a yellow line, there's a lot of signs. I mean, do that in Calcutta, India. You know? So, yes, machines do smarter and smarter things, but sometimes we forget to ask, but who structured the environment for them so that they could do that? Okay? The environment is not a detail. In some cases, it's 90% of the solution. You know? Recognizing a cat is great, but how long does it take a mouse to recognize a cat? You know? We had to use 16,000 processors and so on. So AlphaGo, okay, I'll skip the details, but AlphaGo, at the end of the day, what does AlphaGo do? One thing, it plays Go. And by the way, it has to be that board. What is it, 1919? If you do it 18 by 18, you have to retrain the network. AlphaGo, I did a little calculation based on their paper. In my opinion, consumed about 440,000 watts. You know how many watts your brain consumes? 20. Okay? Now, you cannot play Go as well as AlphaGo, but I think you can do a hell of a lot more things than AlphaGo. So, a 20-watt machine on 1915, a 440,000-watt machine. Okay? And so I always kid, let both the human and AlphaGo run on 20 watts and see who wins the Go. Okay. Now, the other thing, don't forget what I told you before, the data set. The secret is the data set, okay? And if you look at the achievements of AI consistently, first somebody creates a data set, then you have a major sensational headline in the newspapers. Moore's law, I don't know about, but a lot of ideas are actually old. And I was pleased when I saw this post on OpenAI's blog that said optimization that has been known for decades. A lot of the ideas in AI that the media sell you as a breakthrough, they've actually been there for 20 years, waiting for enough computational power. So let's hope that this keeps going. If Moore's law stops working, will we have the same kind of progress? I don't know. There are problems with the image recognition. Yes, they tell you the error rate is very low. Yeah, but there's papers published where they just use that little perturbation on this image, you get that image, it's the same thing, right? Well, no, the neural network is fooled easily and will not recognize that as a dog. And this one is even better. What are those things? I don't know, gibberish. Well, guess what? The neural network recognized one as an armadillo, a panda, a penguin, a starfish, 99.6% certainty. So they found ways to fool deep learning. And you can read the paper, Deep Fool, a simple and accurate method to fool deep neural networks. Would you trust that thing to drive your car? So chatbots and natural language in general, natural language processing is still way behind. This is a translation of one of my articles on Frank Zappa, greatest musician of the last, I don't know how many centuries. He would have loved the translation with the cranial physics repellent and so on. But the thing is, at the bottom, that's a typical mistake. Geni in Italian can be two things, and it was translated genes. It was geniuses. So very far from having a solution. And even search engines, you would expect search engines to do better than this. I mean, I just Google it. You can do it on your smartphone. I was looking for Saint Augustine, the philosopher who famously asked what is time, and that's what I got from Google just a few minutes ago. Robots, Google canceled the thing that you saw, the video that you saw in which a robot was doing amazing things very quickly. I invite you to watch these videos, DARPA Challenge 2015 and the RoboCup, fantastic. RoboCup is robots playing soccer. Nothing more hilarious came out of Hollywood in the last 20 years. Most robots are toys. They are the evolution of Pinocchio, okay? And in fact, children are becoming the #1 consumer of robots. Now, one section about common sense. I showed you that thing, right? A refrigerator filled with lots of food and drinks. How can that machine be so stupid? Well, it doesn't have common sense. This is my definition of common sense. This happened in April last year in England, where helicopter police was chasing criminals, probably thieves, and children spontaneously, nobody told them, they formed that arrow. Common sense. The helicopter cannot hear you, right? But they can see you. And what is the message you can send right away? Arrow. What does the arrow mean? Direction. Okay? That's common sense. When am I going to get a neural network that can improvise something like this? And to show you the difference, on June 21st, I don't know if you read this, just a few weeks ago, the Los Angeles Times website announced an earthquake. There's been an earthquake, except it was dated to 2025. So most media that received that news, it was a human being that called the USGS and said, hey, I have a wire here that there was an earthquake in 2025. Oh, it's a mistake. Okay, done. Except the websites, they use the bot to aggregate news. So the Los Angeles Times proudly reported an earthquake that never happened. So then, so that's a reality check on the technology, okay? There is progress, but you need a grain of salt, as the Romans used to say. Why grain of salt? It's another trivia. Progress is accelerated like never before. My favorite age is 1 century ago. Okay, let's go back to 1880, 1910. Okay, one generation. In one generation, the car was invented, the airplane was invented, the telephone was invented, the radio was invented, the record, cinema. You could see people fly. You could talk to your mom thousands of kilometers away. You can even hear the voice of a dead tenor, opera singer. At the same time, they invented quantum mechanics, relativity, all the appliances you can name today except the microwave oven. The office was revolutionized, skyscrapers, all of this happened in 25 years. Are you sure that you live in an age that is experiencing unique progress? I'm not denying that there is progress. I'm just saying, well, maybe we're not as familiar with the past as we are with, by the way, I grew up, you know, I was 14 when the man went on the moon. I was sure by the time I die, I'll be going to the moon so many weekends. How many of you have been on the moon? Concorde, fastest plane in the world, retired. Okay, we never built another one as fast as that. So yeah, there is progress, but I disagree with people who think it's a unique acceleration of progress. And then the last two assumptions. I mean, we've had superhuman intelligence since we exist. Can you sniff things like a dog? My favorite is the bat. Can you fly in the dark at amazing speed, avoid obstacles, capture insects, and land upside down? That's superhuman intelligence. And the machines, we've had these machines that do things that nobody can do. This is a watch. Can you tell me for how many minutes I've been speaking? This thing can. Yeah, no human being can do that, but this machine can do it. Superhuman. Okay, so in my opinion, it rests on very weak philosophical foundations. And of course, I can do this more seriously. This is more, lightweight. If you really have to, actually, I dug up an old paper published here at Xerox PARC in 1987 that talks about phase transitions in artificial intelligence systems. That's the intelligent way to talk about artificial intelligence. Okay? Okay, now my fear is that, okay, let me tell you. Turing test, you know Turing test? When a machine becomes as intelligent as human being, dang, artificial intelligence. Well, there are two ways to achieve this. Okay, you got the point. One way is this. You make the machine more and more intelligent. The other way is to make a human being less and less intelligent. Okay? In both cases, Turing test, done. So my feeling is that we are turning people into machines very often. That's what we do most of the time. Okay? So my question for you, I think it's a question, the next one. This is philosophical. Humans want to build machines that think like humans, while machines are already building humans who think like machines. Is it possible that humans have moved a lot closer towards machines than machines have moved towards humans? So think about it, okay? Soviet Union was the future, not the past. That's a long story, but it was the vast algorithmic bureaucracy. Everything that is not mandatory is forbidden. Every country is moving in that direction, okay? Don't get me started. Don't get me started. This is a guy who's exactly using that mindset. It's all a game. It's all about rules, winning and losing. So a singularity, in my opinion, I'm running late, but we started late. In my opinion, a singularity is a very old story. We've had so many apocalypses. Remember the Mayan, was it the end of the Mayan calendar? Y2K. So to me, people are really so eager to get the singularity are in that sphere. That's a long story, but there's some good books you can read that show that from the beginning, there's been a religious element in cyberspace, in all the talk about computation, artificial intelligence, and now the singularity. But, and by the way, if you think that new technology is giving us longer lifespans, good luck. So far, the oldest person who ever lived died 20 years ago. Nobody's been able to live longer. Anyway, next. People ask me, will machines become conscious? Well, you are welcome to study all the theories of mind that have been published by philosophers the last century. I always ask back, man, we slaughter 60 billion mammals, fish, and birds every year. Nobody ever asked, are they conscious? Yes, I'm vegetarian. So I don't think it's a very interesting question at this point. Jobs. The countries with the highest number of robots. Guess which is number one in Europe? Germany. Number one in Asia? Japan. Number one in America? US. Guess which countries have the lowest unemployment in each continent? Germany, Japan, US. Okay, so I'm not an economist. I don't see the correlation between new technology and unemployment. World GDP per person, and that's from Forbes, shows the exponential of technology. Seems to me that technology has not been a bad deal for humanity as a whole. There are already, machines already stole millions of jobs. We don't think of it, but think of the traffic light. When I was a kid in Italy, oh my God, the cheating the system was just waiting until the traffic cop turns and then zoom. All that fun is gone. The problem is, of course, a lot of jobs are being killed and will get killed. Now the question is that people should study the right things, and that's always been true with technology. So that's the thing, that China is graduating, what was it, 5 million new engineers, mathematicians in a year, and maybe the United States, there are states where it's 2 or 3. So that is a problem. That is a problem. But if you look globally, technology will create, in my opinion, a lot of jobs, better paid jobs, and hopefully also more peaceful. Okay, so this journalist wrote the book, that book in Chinese. One day she asked me, "Are you afraid of AI?" And I answered, "I'm afraid it will not come soon enough." Why? Because after I told you all of this, I tell you the good news. I mean, there are real applications. And a few years ago, I was giving this presentation, and I was mentioning that the Philips showed me that they have 135 billion medical images. Okay, one doctor saw the image that they took of you. That's it. But that image might contain very important information. And I said, I want to have neural networks running all the time, like the Google crawler, running all the time on all the medical images according to the latest scientific knowledge. And God only knows how many millions of lives we could save. We could prevent a lot of diseases. Well, guess what? 2017, Sebastian Thrun at Stanford published a paper of a neural network that can detect skin cancer. And in England, they can detect heart attacks, prevent heart attacks. These things can save a lot of lives. So very encouraging. We need AI soon because I can think of many other real applications, especially aging societies. You know, we keep thinking in terms of babies, but very soon we will have to think we are getting old and we survive. That's a major problem for society. And there's a lot of help can come from artificial intelligence. Drug discovery, we still haven't defeated, forget cancer, even Ebola. I mean, how is it possible we can't find quickly drugs for rare diseases and new viruses that are still killing a lot of people? In my opinion, cybersecurity will be the big threat to the future of states, of societies. And in general, human-to-human interaction, and now that's the little publicity. I work with the Peace Innovation Lab at Stanford, and we work on peace technology, things like trust algorithms. Long story. Just Google it, Peace Innovation Lab at Stanford. And human-machine interaction, because we'll have more and more machines, of course. And some things will be useful, some things will not. I have a strong background in the humanities, because of my Italian genes. So I believe that AI should not be so isolated as it is now in the sciences. Now, people are afraid of machines. I invite them to look at these pictures. I took them, believe it or not, in a Chinese subway. I mean, taking pictures in a Chinese subway without people means it was really early in the morning. Okay, and I was surrounded by these machines. Machines selling tickets, selling food, taking photos, cash, name it. Okay. Then I went through the turnstiles. There was a machine checking my luggage. There was a machine checking my ticket. And what took me down there to the train? A machine. And of course, the train is a machine. The train is a robot, especially in China. Okay. So you are surrounded. You know, this is the most complex robot. Probably everybody in this room has used it multiple times. And it works. And it does amazing things. So my feeling is that the society of robots will create new jobs that today we can't even imagine. Okay? It's easy to imagine the jobs that get killed, that disappear. It's very easy. It's hard to imagine the new jobs. And one example is the smartphone. How many people in 1951? 1951 is when the first computer was sold. How many people in 1951 said, oh, someday this technology will be used to communicate and will create millions of jobs in communications? Probably zero. Well, that's what happened. Okay, the smartphone is the great grandchild of the first computer. So it's hard to imagine what new jobs will be created. But generally speaking, you give something to humans, and humans do something intelligent because we have brains. And at least some of us use it. And so we come up with creative ideas on what to do with technology. It's a long story, but that's the history of human civilization. It's all about a new technology comes and then it gets used. And sometimes it gets used in completely different ways. Unfortunately, sometimes to kill each other. So, by the way, another trivia, this is the centennial of the first jazz record, and so I wanted to pay tribute to jazz music. It has nothing to do with this presentation, I didn't want to forget. So my feeling, robots will create an even more complex society in which human intelligence will be even more important. When I read the papers I just told you about now, I had to use a lot of intelligence that I was not using when I was reading something 40 years ago. So it will require higher and higher skills. That's the catch. We have to train people to be more intelligent. So the future always surprises us, and I think this is the end. You can download my presentation there, and thank you very much. Okay, I think that there's time for questions, I guess.
We'll take some questions. I have a mic here.
There's a question here.
I'll take it because we're recording it. Okay. So, thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, most interesting, grazie. Two comments I would like to make. One is you need to be careful when you are not in your area of expertise. When it comes to aging, there is a guy actually here in Silicon Valley who predicts that we will get 1,000 years old, Audrey Debray. And in terms of supersonic flight, also need to be careful. I think there's a lot happening right now, and there's already some very good developments going on. So it will happen again. There will be another Concorde.
But even if it happens, I mean, we went down, right? I mean, we had the Concorde, and now we don't have it. So.
No, I'm just, so it's just a
long-term,
casual remark on the edges. But one area that I think would be interesting is, for example, to interpret what, let's say, a mockingbird is singing. Has anybody tried to do this?
Yeah, do what?
What a mockingbird song, what it means? I mean, you know, we are talking about translation.
And which mockingbird
That's
is
a good question. My neighborhood mockingbird.
I like your longitudinal analysis. So my question is, since you're so creative, deep neural network, what happens after? That fad will go, and what's the next one?
So a lot of people ask me, what's the next breakthrough? As you probably guessed, I don't think that going deep is a real breakthrough. I mean, it does help. My feeling is that the whole thing about deep learning started when somebody discovered how the visual cortex of the cat works. It was a neuroscience discovery that then Fukushima simulated, and then 10, 15 years later, LeCun turned into a wonderful algorithm. My feeling that this is where we get the next breakthrough. And both the United States and the European Union have projects, big projects, to analyze the way the brain works, map it out, right? I know that in this country, government projects don't have a good reputation, but if you think of the Apollo program, Human Genome Program, these things have had a huge impact, not only on that technology that they specifically targeted. So my feeling is that we may look back 10 years ago and think that the day Obama funded the BRAIN initiative was the most important event for artificial intelligence. That out of that study, we'll get something from the brain that would be the ha-ha moment, where we realize, oh, it's not only about going deep, but it's about something I don't know right now.
As a layman who knows nothing about artificial intelligence or virtual reality, is there any connection between the two?
I mean, you can make the connection. You can make the connection, but I would see them as relatively different things. Artificial intelligence, at the end of the day, is computational math. It's algorithms to make machines do things. And the question is, when can you call it AI as opposed to just algorithm? But to me, it's just, at the end of the day, it's just computational math.
Hi. I have a question about how important do you think the level of our understanding of how human brain or human consciousness work towards the direction of creating a general AI? Because actually we don't really know how human consciousness work, but we still trust other humans on performing all the intellectual tasks.
Yeah, we know very little about the human brain, very little. You can read books. I can recommend the recent book by Giulio Tononi, just because he's Italian, I guess. But there's many books that you can read, dozens of different theories, which tells you we don't know much about the human brain, actually. We know more and more about specific regions. I mean, we can pinpoint regions that are responsible for brain diseases, which is encouraging. But we know very little about the general working of the brain. And the last thing we know is where does consciousness come? And that I'm not even sure that neuroscience can answer that. So that's really a philosophical issue. You are a consciousness trying to figure out where consciousness comes from, which may have its own philosophical problems.
I'm curious whether you have thought about distinguishing machine learning and the Minsky style of AI in terms of perception versus cognition, in that all the neural nets and things are all really perceptron influenced in terms of perception, and maybe the barrier they haven't reached or bridged is the one of cognition, and that might be a useful way to distinguish the two.
Yeah, recently Roger Schenck, who was very famous in AI, wrote on his blog an article against accusing IBM of abusing the term cognition. And he was right, except he forgot to mention that he abused the term cognition in his days. I think that's a much bigger step. And cognition, by the way, is not only human. To me, every living system is cognition. And cognition is an integration of so many things. You cannot perceive without memory. You cannot reason without perception. You cannot, they're all integrated. And of course, there's no machine that comes close to doing those things. That's why, to be honest, GANs are interesting from a cognitive point of view, because they don't just recognize a pattern. That's what neural networks do very well, right? Recognize patterns. They actually can generate something. So that's closer to stepping into, I don't want to call it intelligence, but something higher than just recognition.
Question. So over here. Right here. So when you described the evolution 2006, 2012, you mentioned, I think, data set and computing power as like two tailwinds. Is there a third that could happen in the next, whatever, near future that might take it to another level?
Yeah, that's actually, that's a really good question. It's a long discussion. I mean, was there real progress in AI, or was it just that we used old ideas, implemented it on powerful machines, and so that's a tricky question. So again, my feeling is that mapping the brain will give us a new element to do something different. But my answer is I don't know.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So do you think that, you mentioned the projects to get a complete connectivity diagram of the human brain, but do you think that might be a false hope even if we had it? Because we've had the connectome for the C. elegans nematode for a long time and don't know how it works. And of course we know the complete wiring diagram of every deep learning machine that's ever been built, but we don't really know how it works. So it seems to me that we're lacking a theoretical foundation for a lot of the stuff, even in advance of trying to get the connectivity of the human neurological system.
So if I'm not competent about the concord and longevity, I'm definitely not competent about the brain. So I would send you to talk to a neuroscientist. What I know is that every 2 or 3 years, neuroscience finds out something amazingly new that we had no idea. So I would rephrase it as in, there's a lot of work to do. So if you ask me the time frame of deciphering or mapping the brain, it's probably very long. But then again, when they started the Human Genome Project, we didn't expect it to finish so early. So, you know, there is hope. Was he next? He has the hand raised for a long time.
Because this is a question, or I guess more of a comment to the earlier question about the next big, perhaps, technology, quantum computing, whether that could perhaps, in addition to what you mentioned about mapping the brain.
Yeah, I heard so many bad things about quantum computing that now I'm very reluctant to talk about it. So, but again, I'm not competent, so I will not comment.
We'll take 3 more questions. I have 1, 2, and then 3. And then afterwards, we'll open up to a reception, and you're welcome to come up and ask more questions.
Over here on this side. One aspect you didn't talk about, I think, was the growth in funding for research, which is just probably has exponentiated. So, I mean, that is a factor on how fast progress will go. Secondly, what's a couple things that bad things you hear about quantum computers? Just
Now, the second one, I don't want to get in trouble on the second one. On the first one, I agree, and we have discussions about this. Because second order effect, all the big brains, the big famous people in AI have been hired by Google, Facebook, Microsoft, name it, right? So then there's a big discussion, is it good or bad? And that's an interesting discussion, but that's very long. But I'll give you a short answer that I give. William Shockley. William Shockley left a research center to start a lab. And out of Shockley, you got Fairchild. Out of Fairchild, you got Intel and all the other silicon companies, and you got Silicon Valley. So you know, when money comes into the equation, it's hard to predict what's going to happen next. I'm neutral. I'm not sure if it's good or bad. Clearly, there's a lot more PhD students publishing papers. So that should be good, yeah. So yeah, that's a very good point. It could be the number 3 you were asking for.
Do I understand correctly that you reject the term artificial in the name artificial intelligence, and that you like the name machine intelligence?
No, I think...
I saw that in your slides, I thought.
Yeah. See, if you want this discussion, you can have with a philosopher, but the word intelligence is very vague. And even the word artificial, you know, philosopher would argue, what is artificial? So artificial intelligence is definitely not the best way to call it. When you call it neural network, it's pretty much clear what you're meaning. If you call it even statistical machine learning, SVM, ID3, and so on, fairly clear what you're talking about. When you say artificial intelligence, I mean, is that microphone artificial intelligence? You know,
well, I happen to believe that artificial intelligence was a stupid name. It was introduced by my former boss, John McCarthy, and I confess that I helped, or I actually mainly set up the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Lab in 1965, the original one. And a lot of the confusion in discussing this matter, I think, has to do with the poor choice of name. And incidentally, if you accept the name machine intelligence, which is more accurate, I believe, then you might notice that the singularity happened in 1945, and that's when the machines started taking over, and they're still at it, and will go a long way before either we get replaced or we manage to kill ourselves. We're working hard on that.
Yeah, it's a good point. Just to clarify, I hope I was not too critical of McCarthy and Minsky and so on. John McCarthy, by the way, I think he was a great mathematician. And one of his papers, was it Computers with Common Sense? I think it's one of the most influential papers written in this field. So I respect him, but I totally agree. The term is so confusing that, but it's great for the media. It's great for Hollywood, for newspapers.
So back to the question about longevity. My understanding from your slide is that you don't see a huge exponential growth in lifespan. I've been to some of the Ray Kurzweil talks where he says that it is exponential, so I'm just wondering what the disconnect is.
Just read the numbers. As I showed, there's nobody in the last 20 years that lived longer than that woman. That's the oldest recorded person. And it can go both ways. I mean, there's no question that medicine is saving a lot of people that in the old days would have died, even children. You know. But it goes both ways. I mean, the CDC and the British equivalent keep sending alarms that there's antibiotic-resistant viruses coming. And you know, I don't know if you saw it, just a few weeks ago, there was a report, a study, that the quality of sperm has declined 50% in what? A few years. So that, I mean, Kurzweil, you know, handpicks the good news. But if you look at good news and bad news, I'm not sure. I mean, we seem to be a lot sicker than previous generations. Of course, we have medicine that keeps us alive a lot longer. By the way, another discussion is whether it's worth being kept alive so long, because I visited once a place where there were a lot of centenarians, and they were all, yes, I'm not sure I want to, you know, I'd rather die right now of a heart attack. So, again, I mean, it's a long story. But, you know, I have nothing against studying, and the serious people who are studying longevity are in biotech. See, if I had to give this talk about biotech, it would be very different. Number one, are you afraid of biotech? Yes. Is there progress in biotech? Yes. You know, is it coming soon? Yes. You will have designer babies within a generation. You know, society will have to make terrible. Elon Musk should read a good book on biotech and start worrying about biotech. So AI is the wrong place to have these discussions. You know. Done?
Great. On that note, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.